Welcome to RajaReads. I'm Masood Raja, and on this channel, I introduce you to books from different parts of the world and occasionally talk about the reading practices themselves. Now, a few weeks ago, I had recorded a video about modes of reading in which I had tried to discuss several different ways of approaching the act of reading. But today I specifically want to talk about the role of the reader in the act of reading. Now, the way we all are trained, whether formally or informally, we always accord more significance to the author and to the text. And most of the times we think that our job is to seek the intention of the author in a novel or a story, or to see what a story is trying to tell us or teach us. And we tend to sort of diminish our own subjective responses to the text or our own thoughts about the text. But in my opinion, based in my research and study, I think the reader is the most significant aspect of the act of reading. And here are some of my reasons. First of all, any novel, memoir, or short story that you read is always addressed to a reader. Okay, most of the times these texts have what Wolfgang Iser calls the implied reader, right? The reader which the author had in mind, the degree of their sophistication, their age, that defines for them as to what kind of story will they write. But most of the times in the world, it's not just the implied reader of the text who reads the text, right? Anyone who picks up a book and reads it is an active reader of the text. Now you can write the most beautiful novel or a short story and publish it in the most ornate form. That does not complete the story without a reader, unless a reader picks a book and reads it and forms an opinion about it. So the reader then constitutes the value of the text itself, right? So the most important part is the texts are, of course, addressed to a reader. But two, when you pick up a book and start reading it, you are an active part of this exercise called reading, because you see in the text what you see in the text, based in your own assumptions, your own preferences, your own value system, right? And you bring all of that to bear upon a text to see what it means, what its value is, what its standard is, right? All of those decisions, the text isn't telling you, the novel isn't telling you this is what I mean. You are making those meanings, and that is why your role as a reader is absolutely crucial and significant. So what that teaches us is that we can't just continue reading books. We also need to keep developing ourselves as more versatile, as more complex readers. And part of it comes from our reading, but part of it also comes from secondary readings that teach us how to read a symbol, how to read a sign, how to read a metaphor. All of these things that you learned in high school and maybe in college were meant to give you the tools to become a better, more attentive reader, right? But there is something even more important than that, and that is to approach a work of art or to approach literature with an open mind, with our preferences, but to allow the text to make us feel, so that we as readers or you as a reader then develop the capacity to change. And that is when stories become transformative. Not because they themselves, in themselves, are transformative, but because they encounter a reader who has opened a space for a story to impact their lives, impact their modes of thinking. Now, this aspect of reader being important, of course, is backed by dense literary and philosophical theory, right? There are people like Stanley Fish, Louise Rosenblatt. 1937, she wrote a book in which she basically taught us that the act of reading is a transaction between the reader and a text, and both come together to construe meaning. Now, if you go by Stanley Fish, the reader doesn't necessarily look for the meaning in a text, but they look for what a text does, right? In the pages of the book, how does it work? How is it organized? What impact does that organization have on them? And then how does a text work on them in general as they read it? Does it make them feel good? Does it make them feel better? So that allows us to then foreground our own feelings after we read a novel, our own modes of thinking after we read a novel, and not just privilege the author's intention or what are the words on the page of a novel. And that all is possible because the reader is taken seriously and the reader is an active participant in the act of reading. So think about it. You see so many people talking about books on YouTube, right? They're trying to explain to you why this is a good book, why this is a bad book, right? What books should we read? I mean, what they are then telling you is what their response to the book is as readers, right? Without reading those books, they can't have those opinions. But what we need to further decipher is that their opinions, or my opinions as readers, are not natural, right? They are determined and sometimes over-determined by our politics, by our class, race, sexuality, gender. All of these predispose us to become certain kinds of readers, and that predisposition then decides for us whether we find a work to be a good work, if we find a novel a good novel, or we find it wanting. It will always be wanting in terms of what our expectations of the novel are, right? What our expectations of the text are. And those expectations are, so many scholars of literary studies would tell you, socially constructed, right? Ideologically produced. So why am I talking about this reader and its significance? Because I think if we keep this in mind, that you, me, and everyone else who reads books, reads stories, reads novels, are not just passive recipients of whatever is in a novel or a story, but rather active agents of meaning making in that process, then we know that we have a certain degree of agency in reading the books, and that agency is mediated through whatever our ideological position is in the world, whatever we believe to be good, whatever we believe to be generous, kind, right, proper, and that those values in so many ways determine the value of a novel and a short story. So what can you do with it? You know, like just like an average person like me in the world, if you see someone's review of a book, right? If you see someone's video review of a book, what this enables you to ask is the question, why is this person saying this about this book? Where are they coming from? What is their class? What is their race, ethnicity, gender, politics? Because then you can watch that review or listen to it or read it and understand that it is not an unmotivated review. It is imbued with the preferences and the prejudices of the reviewer. That is what it enables you to do. But if you are a researcher, and if you're writing about literature, a paper, a book, right, then what it enables you to do is not just accord undue significance to the text itself, but maybe also incorporate your thoughts as a reader. If the text makes you feel a certain way or makes you think a certain way, you should not assume that those thoughts do not belong in a scholarly paper. They absolutely do. You can give us a record of that. You can tell us, why do you feel a certain way when you read Uncle Tom's Cabin, right, or Heart of Darkness? A genealogy of your own response to a text then becomes a deeper understanding of the reading process itself, but also a deeper and careful understanding of your own preferences and prejudices as a reader. And if you just keep this lesson in mind, remember, in life, as we read different situations, as we interact with different people, if we keep this in mind that part of what we are opining or part of what we are thinking about someone is based in our own assumptions of right and wrong, the assumptions socially produced, then maybe we can become more generous and kind to others, because then maybe we can understand their actions within a given context in juxtaposition with our own expectations of what they ought to do, right? So that is why if you start by privileging the reader and reader's positioning, reader's class, and reader's privilege to read a certain text with his or her socially constructed points of view, then what you are wresting from the text and from the author is the right to read and interpret text based in your own experience, your own consciousness, and your own socially produced readerly identity. So that is what I wanted to share today. I hope it is useful to you. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will keep producing these brief conversations for you, and I hope they are useful to you. Take care of yourself in this pandemic. Take care of others. And as always, from me to you, peace and love.